welcome to the October the 11th, 1994 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you the history of our city for some of those that have made history in the past and some of those that are continuing to make history even today. And we're very pleased and honored today. We have a very special couple as our interview people on the set. And we're very pleased to welcome our wonderful city manager, Mr. Gary Gwynn. Welcome to the set, Mr. Gwynn.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Yes,
Glad to be here.
and I see that you have brought a wonderful young lady with you, Pat Gwynn, your wonderful wife. Welcome to the set.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're delighted to have both of you all here to bring to focus part of the history that's happening today in Grand Prairie. And you've been with us for a little while as our city manager and our first lady of the city manager set. And we know that you've made significant contributions, but when we do our history show, we always like to set the stage by giving your genealogy. And since this is our history tape number 234, you're sort of down the line from the first interviews that we've done, but we'd like for you to look out into your camera, Mr. Gwynn, and establish yourself and give us your genealogy. Anyone you'd like to mention that where you had your illustrious beginning.
Okay, very good. Well, I was born in Sherman, Texas. My mother and dad both grew up there. My mother's father was in the grocery business and owned and operated a grocery store that's across the street from Austin College in Sherman. Anybody that went to Austin College back in the 1930s and 1940s certainly remembers that grocery store. My father's dad was an engineer for the Frisco Railroad, and some of my earliest memories as a child were meeting him down by the railroad tracks, which were about a half block from the house where they lived, and he would step off of the locomotive as it came by, and wearing his railroad engineer's outfit with the cap and the red kerchief around his neck, and we would walk back up to the house. My dad worked at Prairie Air Force Base in Sherman as a civilian employee during World War II, and he was an inspector. And he has pretty much always been involved in aviation. He worked later for General Dynamics for about 16 years, and then for Bell Helicopter for about the same amount of time. And we lived in Fort Worth. When I was in the first grade, we moved from Sherman after Prairie Air Force Base had closed at the end of World War II to Fort Worth for my dad to go to work at what is now Lockheed, what was General Dynamics, and back at that time was actually Consolidated. I grew up all over Fort Worth. I went to 8 different schools in Fort Worth. We moved a lot early on, and when I got to junior high school, then we sort of settled down in one place, and then I went to a couple of junior high schools in Fort Worth. The second one I went to was just because they built a new junior high in the area, and I was closer to it, and so I went to that one. Then I went to Poly High School and graduated from Poly back a long time ago.
You'd give us the year.
Reluctantly, 1958.
All right, that was a good year. But now, before we get into your career any farther, I'd like for you to go back and give us your parents' name, including your mother's maiden name, if you would document that for us.
Okay, my parents' names, my dad's name is Garnet Gwynn, and he's still alive, lives in Irving. My mother died about 6 years ago. Her name was Margaret. Her maiden name was Andrews.
Okay. Brothers and sisters?
I have one brother, a real rascal. He sort of lives in Houston, but he also kind of lives in Tulsa. His home is actually in Houston, but he is with Occidental Petroleum, and his job is in Tulsa. And hopefully the next couple of years or so, he's going to be able to go back to Houston. He commutes back and forth between the two places right now.
You would name drop him, I know.
His name is Kenny. Kenneth Ross Gwynn.
Okay. Now, we had you at Poly High School, and you spent your wonderful years there. Did you excel academically, or were you a big sports person? Or tell us a little bit about the real Gary Gwynn back when he was a teenager.
I did all right academically. I was no sensation by any stretch of the imagination. I played basketball, I played football, I was on the track team. Back in those days, Polly was the basketball power in Fort Worth. There was a coach that was there that I played for. He spent 11 years at Poly High School.
You would name him?
His name is Jack Harley, and Jack Harley lives over on Lake Hawkins in East Texas now. And Coach Harley was there, like I said, for 11 years, and he won district 10 years. He won state twice. He was a great coach, and I had the pleasure, although I didn't really realize at the time it was a pleasure, to play for him and learned a great deal from him.
Any of your other teachers in Poly that really were your mentor, or do you think the coach had more influence? Give us some influence, mentor experience there.
Well, I did learn an awful lot from Coach Harley, but also the man that was principal at that time, whose name was Clarence Thompson, and all the kids called him Mr. T, was a real example to me and to all of us. Mr. T had an expression that he drilled into our heads, and it was, remember who you are and where you're from. And if you didn't take that to heart, he helped you remember that.
Oh,
and he was a real inspiration to all of us.
And from Poly?
From Poly, I went to Texas Tech for a year on a football scholarship. After that, I came back to the University of Texas at Arlington. At that time, it was Arlington State College. I stayed at UTA and graduated in '63 with a bachelor's degree in economics.
And what turned you in that direction from football, basketball, and all of the other endeavors?
Well, I just realized I was going to have to ultimately earn a living, and I went through UTA with the idea that I would go to law school, but that didn't work out.
That got tough, didn't it?
Well, it got tough, but also I got a part-time job with the city of Fort Worth and went to work for them, and there was a city manager there at that time named Jerry Brownlee who told me that he thought that I really needed to be a city manager and that I was too honest to be a lawyer. I didn't know what he meant by that, but he suggested that I ought to take a hard look at city management. And I remembered back in my government and civics courses in high school and in college, I was always fascinated by the council manager form of government, and I did have a natural interest in that. And so Jerry kind of gave me a shove, and pretty soon I was in this business.
All right. We're going to let you rest a moment. And now we're going to Miss Pat. Miss Pat, this is also your camera. I'd like for you to look out and give your genealogy and name drop your parents and any siblings and put that on our record, would you?
All right. My parents were Doris Sarber and my father, Jim Adcock. They were both from a little tiny town called Wewoka, Oklahoma, and they were high school sweethearts and dated through high school and then married in college. And we lived in Wewoka for about, until I was in the 3rd grade. I finished 3rd grade there. And then we moved to Shawnee, which is another small town in Oklahoma, central Oklahoma. And I went all through high school there and had some wonderful teachers throughout my grade school, junior high, and high school years. I remember one especially, a Miss Brown, who was our reading teacher in the 5th grade, I believe, and she really instilled in me a wonderful love of reading and a desire for kind of adventure tales and living through books. So I've always been very fond of her for that, and we were very challenged in that school to read a little beyond our abilities and to stretch and really try to get the most from reading. So I've always had a real interest in English and reading and took that on through school, through high school, and on into college with me.
All right. How about siblings?
I have a younger brother who's 2 years younger than I am. His name is Mike, and he is an attorney. He practiced for some time with the IRS, and then became president and CEO of an oil company in Oklahoma City. and just recently retired from that position and went back to Shawnee and has opened his own shop again and is attorney back in Shawnee, Oklahoma, where we all grew up. And now his 3 sons have some of my friends as their high school and junior high and grade school teachers. So it's kind of come full circle. We lived there, grew up there, and now his children are in school there and have some of my friends as their teachers.
In your high school career in Shawnee, were there favorite teachers? And tell us a little bit about your high school life.
I enjoyed high school. I was always a bit of a joiner, and I belonged to the pep squad and the student council and all of the girls' clubs and the after-school groups. And I went all through grade school and junior high in Girl Scouts and Campfire and Bluebirds and did all those things and was always into something. I enjoyed being with other people. About the time I was 8, my little sister was born. I have a little sister who now is, of course, grown and has her own family and lives in Durant, Oklahoma.
You would name her?
And her name is Denise. I always call her Dee Dee. She'll always be Dee Dee to me. But she now has 3 children of her own and owns her own jewelry store there in Durant with her husband. And they live there with my mother now. My mother is in Durant. My dad died about 3 years ago. And so at least that part of my family is still close together and living in Durant.
Wonderful. And after high school?
After high school, I went to Oklahoma State University in Stillwater. My best friend and I from high school, whose name is Marilyn, decided to be roommates, and she and I roomed together our freshman year, and then we both pledged in different sororities and kind of went our separate ways. But we were very close, and took a lot of my high school friends went to Oklahoma State, so there were lots of friends there, and I made, of course, a lot of new friends in the sorority and got to know a lot of people from all over the country there.
Did you plan a career from your Oklahoma State experience?
When I went to Oklahoma State, I had decided with my dad's help. My dad was my mentor, and he was a real strong force in my life, and he instilled in me a desire to work with people and to help people. And so I started out with the idea of going into sociology, psychology, a little anthropology. That was going to be my career path. And indeed, I did graduate from OU with a degree in sociology. But I had lots of other work in city planning. I took a lot of my elective courses in city planning and kind of got on that side of it, and never really put my sociology degree to work except in everything I do. I suppose there's a bit of that. All the things my father instilled in me and things I tried to learn from him about being with people and working with people, still with me.
All right. Now, Mr. Gwynn, how did you meet this wonderful young lady along your career ladder?
Well, I was lucky, I guess.
That's it? You mean she didn't plan it that way?
Well, she won't admit it if she did. I suspect that was the deal all along, but she won't spell all that out for me. Actually, Pat and I had known each other for a long time. I had met her several years before we began dating, and one night we were at a dinner party that a group of friends had, and she happened to sit next to me, and we just started talking, and one thing led to another, and the next day or so I called her and asked her if she'd like to go out, and she told me she was busy for several days. She finally worked me into her schedule, her busy social calendar.
Yes.
And we got together, and that was it. There just hadn't been room for anybody else since then.
All right. Did you meet her in Fort Worth, Texas?
Yes.
In Fort Worth, Texas. That's great.
I actually met her just about the time that I was getting ready to leave to go to Tyler, and we decided after a while that we couldn't afford the telephone bill between the two places, and so she just came to Tyler with me.
That is wonderful. And in your city managership career, you began as a student out of college working part-time in Fort Worth. Bring us up to date on your career a little bit, would you?
right as I got out of college, actually, it was I was still taking a couple of courses and went to work full time for the city of Fort Worth, and was with the city 3.5 years, and was an administrative assistant to the public works director. And the public works director back then was a guy who was interested in building storm drains and repairing streets, and he didn't care anything about the administrative part of the job. So I got involved with the budget for what was a very large department back in those days, and the personnel matters and purchasing and all of those things. And in that capacity, I had to work very closely with the city manager's office. And as I indicated earlier, the city manager sort of adopted me and decided that I ought to seriously consider city management. And he was a very persuasive person, and I listened to him and took his advice. And after I had been in Fort Worth about 3.5 years, I was approached by the mayor of the city of Canyon, Texas, which is out just south of Amarillo. Canyon is the place where West Texas State University is located. And I went out to Canyon and was city manager there for a couple of years. Then I was approached by the city of Edinburgh, way down in the southern tip of Texas, near the Rio Grande, near the city of McAllen. Edinburgh is a city of about 20,000 or so, and Pan American University is in Edinburgh. And I went down there and was city manager there for a couple of years, and had a very pleasant experience there. We were selected as a model city under the old program that the Department of Housing and Urban Development used to have, and we also were selected as an All-America city. And then I had an offer to go into the consulting business, and actually moved back to Fort Worth, worked in an office in the Great Southwest Complex, and worked all over the state of Texas with municipal clients. That led to an involvement with a real estate development company, and I was employed by those folks, the real estate people, for about 3 years. And after that, I went back to work for the city of Fort Worth as an assistant city manager. Was there for 7 years. And by adding all this up, you can tell I'm really pretty old. Then after 7 years with Fort Worth as an assistant city manager, I went to Tyler as city manager, and I was there for 9 years. And we've been in Grand Prairie now for 3 years.
Okay, now we're going to let you rest a minute. We have you in Grand Prairie, Texas. I won't ask you about Tyler or any of the other places because we want to really clue in on Grand Prairie, but I need to get with Pat. Pat, your career, do you work out of the home now? And if you do, what do you do? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I do work out of the home. I'm now working for Xerox at Infomart in Dallas. And I have an excellent job with them as an event consultant. I've had that job since about March, and I've really enjoyed that. Prior to that, I was with Fidelity National Title in the Las Colinas office, and I was with Fidelity for about, close to 1.5 years. And I took a year off when we first moved to Grand Prairie so that we could build our home and get settled here and kind of learn our way around and get ourselves established. So before that, in Tyler, I also worked. I worked the entire 9 years that we were there. About 5 years for one of the major hospitals there. I was with the public relations office. And then I worked for the University of Texas at Tyler. Did some continuing education for them, and also worked in their public information office. So I've worked all my life. Again, another thing I got from my dad was a desire to get out and work and use the talents that God gave me, and along with Mother's prodding every once in a while to settle in and focus on one thing and do the best I could. I've worked since I was old enough to be out of the house. So I've had a long career.
That's wonderful. All right, would you like to name drop your family? You have children. Would you like to put them into your record?
Yeah. We have 2 daughters. Our oldest daughter's name is Susie. Susie is 31, and she's married, and she lives in Frederick, Oklahoma.
Oh, my.
And Susie is employed at the Wichita Falls State Hospital. She's been there for, I guess now 8 or 9 years, a long time. And Susie and Scott, her husband, have a 6-year-old boy who is our grandson. A brilliant child.
Brilliant
child.
He has a name.
Very attractive. His name is Lynn.
Okay, all
Lynn
right.
Keisner. Our youngest daughter, Andrea, is a museum person. She has a master's degree in museum studies from George Washington University, and she has been with the State Preservation Board down in Austin.
Wonderful.
The group that has been responsible for renovating the Capitol building and seeing that the Capitol is furnished. They are responsible for the inventory of antique furniture and art, sculpture that's in the Capitol building, as well as the governor's mansion. She has just taken a new job, and in fact today is her first day on the new job. She's with the Panhandle Plains Museum, which is on the campus of West Texas State University in Canyon, Texas, which is sort of ironic.
Where you started out, yes.
It's all going in circles, yeah.
Yes, it is.
So we're very excited about that, and Pat went up with Andy a couple of weeks ago to help her find a place to live, and so she's settled in and starting a new career.
And you have a beautiful new home out in a new area of Grand Prairie near the soccer fields and 1382, if we dare mention that today. Yes.
We are just across from the soccer fields in Country Club Park Edition.
It's beautiful, and our senior citizen took a tour around y'all's homes yesterday. Oh. Yes, this is Senior Citizen Week while we're doing all this good stuff. All right, now, we're into Grand Prairie, Texas, but I want you off the hook a minute. What is it like to be the wife of a very famous city manager that's been the president probably of every city manager's state and national organization, and keeping up with all this busy itinerary, Miss Pat?
Being the wife of Grand Prairie city manager is the delight of my life. It's hectic, it's demanding, but there's nothing that I'd rather do. He's always on the go, and it takes me and his secretary and several others at City Hall just to keep up with him and to keep him out of trouble and his appointments straight. But between his social calendar, his business calendar, and our personal calendars, we do stay on the go all the time, and I love it that way. We get to meet more interesting people. We are involved in more interesting and exciting activities than I could ever hope to in any other way that I can think of. It's interesting. I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I've tried to approach this as a partnership with him, because we do get in conflict sometime where our times overlap a little bit with what we need to be doing, but it always works out, and he's always agreeable to compromise, and we always find a way to manage to do the things that need to be done and take the trips that need to be taken. My job has worked out very well in that regard. I'm able to take off and travel with him a little bit and provide that support when I think he needs it. So I'm delighted. I wouldn't trade a minute of it.
Wonderful. All right, Mr. Gwynn, we have 2 minutes left on our tape. I'd like for you to look out into your camera and just say anything you'd like to about your career here, anything that you have coming down the pike that sounds exciting. It's all yours.
Well, thank you. As Pat said, we're really pleased to be in Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie is an exciting place because it has tremendous potential, and there's a lot of really great things that have happened in the last few years, and there's certainly a lot more that's going to happen. The Lake Joe Pool is such a tremendous resource that the area around that lake is going to develop and grow, and one of the challenges is trying to ensure that that's orderly, well-developed growth that everybody in Grand Prairie can be proud of. We're really excited about the golf course that's under construction down there. That's going to be an asset that's just going to be hard to comprehend. If you haven't been out there and seen it, it is going to be a real thing of beauty and something that everybody in Grand Prairie can be really proud of. And we think that'll stimulate a lot of activity. There's so much potential here and so much going on that it's exciting to be city manager. And we've had a lot of economic development activity the first part of this year. Since the first part of January, we've seen deals come into Grand Prairie where about 800 new jobs have been created that we've been directly involved in. I'm sure there's been considerably more than that we don't have any direct contact with. But this is a place where things are happening, and I think that it's really beginning to pick up and move. It's kind of surprising. Grand Prairie has not had a great identity throughout the Metroplex, but that's changing very rapidly, and people are realizing that Grand Prairie is a player in the Metroplex, and the times are going to be exciting in this community in the future.
And if you're ever out of the city manager business, and we hope you stay here forever, after city managerships, what would be the forecast? Because they've let me know I have 2 more minutes to get a little bit more out of you today. What would happen to Mr. Gwynn and his career later on? You want to be President of the United States or anything
No,
exciting?
Well, I think that if I had a career in the private sector, it would have to be something that was involved with cities and local government, because obviously that's where my experience and expertise is. And I would suspect that if I ever leave city management, that I might do something in an area related to cities. One of the things that I dream about and reflect about is writing a book someday, a novel maybe about city management, because it's pretty exciting and pretty interesting. No 2 days are ever alike, and there's all kinds of things that come along that you get involved in that a lot of those things everybody in the community knows about and hears about, but a lot of things that happen nobody ever knows occurred. And I'd like to put that in a format where it would be appealing to people and then get some insight into what it's like to be a city manager.
If you were a mentor to some of the younger people that work at City Hall, or maybe someone in our viewing audience that may somewhere down the line want to be a city manager, in about 1 minute I'd like for you to exhort them to look at the career of a city manager.
Well, a city manager's career is certainly one where you're never going to get rich, and you're not going to build up a big nest egg of a lot of money, but there is tremendous satisfaction in the things that can be accomplished. I remember one of the first projects I worked on when I went to work for the city of Fort Worth was the Weatherford-Belknap overpass, and that's a huge bridge. And I'll remember always the contribution that I made in pulling some of the pieces together to help that project eventually get built. And there's a satisfaction in those sorts of things when you've had a career in public service and you look back on the things that have been accomplished, and you know in your heart that you had a role that was part of making those things happen. It's very satisfying, and there's tremendous challenges. I would say to any young person that's interested in this career that education is very important, but there is absolutely no substitute for hard work and commitment to getting the job done. That's what the key to success as a public manager is.
I want to thank you, too, for sharing your lives with us today and being a very important sector in our history, tape number 234. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.